Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really happy to have back an old friend, William Engdahl. Has been with us a number of times. It's been quite a while since we've had him on, and so I'm really pleased to have him back after a trip to China. He has traveled to China a number of times, and we're going to ask him about his latest trip over there and what he's discovering about the mood of the Chinese people and what their attitude might be towards the Trump administration and America in general. I suppose it's always dangerous to generalize because China is a very big place and it has lots of different kinds of people there too. But we'll ask him about what he's seen and heard when he can come back. His most recent works, he's written a number of books that come highly recommended, and you do want to keep up with his work as best you can. So thanks for joining me again, William. It's really good to have you with me.
Jay, it's good to be back with you.
Good to have you with me, and I should tell the people that they should be going to William Engdahl. And Engdahl is spelled, and I always misspell it. My wife always lets me know about it. It's William Engdahl, Engdahl, Engdahl.
Correct.
WilliamEngdahl.com. Go there, folks. There's lots of really interesting articles to read. William is a world traveler, but he spends a lot of time in countries that are considered at least by our deep state, by our military-industrial complex, as our enemies. I really believe that if we, the people, were allowed to talk to Russians, we would rather like them. If we could talk to Chinese, and we certainly do talk to a lot of Chinese, and one of my best friends, Chen Lin, is from Beijing. I don't see any reason why they should be our enemies, frankly. And William comes from Texas, but he lives in Germany after he's got an undergraduate degree from Princeton, pretty prestigious university, and then an advanced degree, or at least advanced studies in Stockholm, so in economics. And I just really always enjoy, William, your views. They are refreshingly different. So thanks again for being with us. And I do want to ask you about China. What can you tell us about the mood of China towards the United States and the Trump administration, based on your discussions with people there?
I had a fascinating 2-week tour. It's part of research for an upcoming book I'm working on the geopolitical implications of the One Belt, One Road, or the Chinese call it the high-speed rail and deepwater port infrastructure project that is economically linking all the land nations of Eurasia for the first time in history. And it's fascinating what's being created there. So I wanted to see with my own eyes. I'm a hands-on touching person. My early training was as an engineer, and I like to build up things, and so I like to see how. And I had a possibility to meet with some of the leading think tanks that are involved in advising the Beijing government on the different routes and strategies of the One Belt, One Road high-speed infrastructure project, to ask them countless questions. Excuse me. And then I wanted to see some of the key sites. So I was taken to Xi'an, a city about 1,000, if I'm remembering correctly, about 1,000 kilometers west of Beijing in central China. Mm-hmm. And Xi'an, it's probably best known in the world as the site of the archaeological excavation of the terracotta warriors. Excuse me. It's also the traditional starting point 2,200 years ago of the ancient Silk Road that brought Chinese silks across land, across Eurasia, through the Middle East into the Roman Empire. Symbolically, that is the starting point of the rail side of the new Silk Road for the Chinese. And there, in a city of 9 million people, believe me, 1 year ago, before my first visit to Xi'an, this was my second, 1 year ago, I had no idea what Xi'an was. And then I had to look it up in Google. And it's a thriving city of 9 million people.
9 million people.
Yeah, in the middle of China. It has a special economic zone for high-tech electronic or IT, kind of like a small Silicon Valley. And then it's home to a hub of the Silk Road rail interlink, the largest rail station in Asia was completed 5 years ago in 2011. And I got a tour through that rail station. Talk about modern technology. I've never seen a Western train station as modern as this. I live in Germany. They have very nice high-speed trains, but the infrastructure is 19th century still. And this was fascinating to see. But it's trains, these high-speed bullet trains, as the Japanese call them, coming and going in every direction, toward Mongolia in the north, toward Kazakhstan in the west, and Russia, down the south toward Kunming and so forth. And this was really beautiful to see. Then I wanted to see the port side of this whole project, because One Belt Road, the belt are a series of deep water ports.
Sure.
And there I was taken, after much discussion with my guides, I decided to opt for Qingdao, Qingdao.
Yep.
And that is a port city on the, directly across from South Korea. And it's by no means the largest port in China. The largest port is Shanghai. But the port in Qingdao is part of the One Belt, One Road. It has direct rail infrastructure connections with the whole high-speed rail network. And it has one of the largest container ports in the world. It's the fourth largest port in China. And the container traffic annually through Qingdao port is larger than Hamburg, the largest port in Germany, and Antwerp combined. It's even larger, taken alone, than Rotterdam. And this is only the fourth largest port in China. And the port director showed me a beautiful kind of model of the enlargement of the port, and then I went by car to see this. And they are going to approximately double the container capacity. It's the first fully automated container port in Asia. So the Chinese are not playing around when they talk about efficiently moving real commodities in the world economy. Wall Street is very good at moving, paper values through derivatives and front-running computers and guess what. But real commodities, that's considered passé. And this is the heart of the difference between China and the U.S., I would say.
Right. It seems like Wall Street is good at smoke and mirrors, kind of. And,
too good.
China, yeah, very good at it and deception. But, William, I'm looking at a map here now of OBAR, One Belt, One Road.
Okay.
So I see there's mainland China.
Yeah.
And then all through Russia to the north, you have one belt economies. I guess that one belt economies, which links up with China. And then you have one road economies, which are to the south. We're looking at all these Asian, I guess you get sea lanes there that connect these countries and their economies together.
Yeah.
But included in that, of course, all those Southeast Asian countries in India, stretching over into Africa to the eastern portion, a couple of the eastern countries, northeastern Africa primarily.
Djibouti, yeah.
This is so. What is the combined population here? I mean, this is an amazing number of people.
Oh, you're talking about more than 50% of the world population,
right?
In the Eurasian part alone. Leave Western Europe out of it. Just in that part alone, China, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Russia, Pakistan, Iran, and so forth. Turkey.
Yeah, and it stretches into portions of Western Europe as well, the One Belt.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you look, the president of China, the initiator of the One Belt, One Road, Xi Jinping, it's his vision, and I have to credit him. He has a beautiful vision. Building up instead of tearing down, which we in the West seem to be very good at, destroying countries but not building them up. So Xi Jinping in 2013 went to Kazakhstan to meet with the president of Kazakhstan, Nazarbayev, and made a speech at the university there where he proposed what has become now the new economic Silk Road, or the One Belt, One Road, because China doesn't want to lock it into this overland historical Silk Road because it's much bigger than that. Now, the maps that you mostly find in the internet, Google Maps or whatever, are not really that current. And I had the special possibility in China to see some of the most current maps, and there's 6 corridors. The one that's most commonly seen in the West is one corridor over land from Xi'an through Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan and Tehran, and then Turkey, and then up to Moscow and down to maybe Western Europe, if Western Europe comes to its senses and gets on board this thing.
Yeah.
There are 6 corridors. India is one of the corridors. It looks like India's Prime Minister Modi is being seduced by the Trump administration to be anti-Chinese, and that's very unfortunate. But India is doing some very, very unfortunate things like this digitalization of currency. Yeah, it's crazy. But there's a dark agenda going on in India under the Modi government. So it will not rise or fall with India being on board or not. And there's a redundancy built into this. The Chinese are not just lightly throwing rail tracks down everywhere for the sake of rail tracks. They know the cultures of the peoples of these countries. They are working on making sure the indigenous people and the governments of the countries understand what this is, including Mongolia, including Iran is very open. They have a long history with China. And they're very sophisticated people, the Iranians, in terms of history, in terms of culture, and so on. So they are fully aware. In fact, I would say the existence of this as a national priority for China was catalyzed by the most stupid decision, and I would call it stupid, of the former Obama administration, announced in, 2012, the Asia pivot. And the Asia pivot of Obama was, why do I call it the November 2001, it was 2011, right. Sorry. And the Obama administration announced the Asia pivot foreign policy, pivoting out of the Middle East toward Asia to protect and show America's presence in Asia. Now, and one of the components of this, to quote Hillary Clinton back then when she was Secretary of State, defending freedom of navigation in the South China Sea.
Yeah, well, exactly the opposite.
Yeah, well, that set alarm bells ringing in Beijing, in the headquarters of the People's Liberation Army, in the Politburo, and the whole shebang, because at the time they announced that, they also made public that they had adopted something in 2010 the Pentagon calls the Air-Sea Battle Doctrine. It's something that this futurologist Andrew Marshall at the Pentagon Office of Net Assessment created. And it's a doctrine for military confrontation with China. And then Defense Secretary Gates spoke about the need to counter China's growing military capabilities. Well, this was back in 2010. The Chinese, I can tell you because I was in China, well, now total of maybe 16 or 17 times since 2008. And they were not at all thinking about preparing for war with the United States.
Yeah.
When this happened, they said, okay, we have not so much time. We better be prepared for the worst and defend our national interests. Mm-hmm. So the freedom of the sea lanes is what these landfills in the South China Sea in territory that's historically claimed by China, mm-hmm. and good right. It's not a cut and dry thing that they stole it from the Philippines or any of the other littoral countries. So this was triggered by the Obama-Asia pivot. Uh-huh. And I think in retrospect, dear President Obama may have given a gift to the world that he never intended. And that was catalyzing what today is the One Belt, One Road, a $22 trillion series of economic infrastructure projects that are going to, if we're not so suicidal in this world that we sabotage everything and blow ourselves up, it's going to transform the possibilities of building up real economies in the entire world, including the United States. Mm-hmm. This is the only...
in spite of our policies, it may be helpful to us. I want to ask you, William, we don't have a lot of time, but I want to ask you, how does the Philippines come into play here? Because the new government in the Philippines has really turned hostile towards the United States. You were saying, the U.S. is trying to claim that we stole the islands from the Philippines. Well, if we did, it certainly doesn't seem to bother the current the current ruler in the Philippines. So what is your take about the Philippines, and why are they turning so hostile towards the United States?
Rodrigo Duterte is, to my mind, far more intelligent and far more interesting person than the Western media makes him out to be. They make him out to be essentially a foul-mouthed sailor talking crude kind of peasant leader. Duterte is in his personal background, I've watched him since he became president. He's no country bumpkin. He's a 71-year-old veteran politician. Yes, he called the American Manila ambassador a gay son of a bitch for criticizing Duterte's war on drug lords and dealers that were destroying the country and destroying the youth. And then he called Obama a son of a whore. Whether this was factually correct or not, he won the hearts and sympathy of his countrymen because they're so sick of being kicked around since 1898 by mm-hmm. American brutality as a dirt kind of vassal state of United States imperialism. Because since the father of Douglas MacArthur was the military dictator of the Philippines after 1898, that's been kind of the history of the Philippines. So he is also interesting because he's the first Mindanoan to become president of the Philippines. He's ethnically Visayan descent, and the Visayans in Mindanao and the rest of the Philippines led a war of independence against Spanish occupation in 1896. Mm-hmm. And that was what led the Spanish to give up the island. But instead, the United States did a double cross. They posed as a supporter of the Visayan independence war and then betrayed them and signed a treaty with Spain in 1898 to get Cuba and the Philippines as U.S. possessions. So this is the history of the background of Duterte. So he's much more shrewd than the Western press takes him to be. And he also is very well aware that China is not the enemy of the Philippines, nor is Russia. But the United States is surely not the friend. Mm-hmm. And
that's their take. And so the Philippines then are becoming perhaps an ally of China in a way. And so that it's very clear as I look at the map, that the sea lanes, which the South China Sea, which the United States has not been willing to allow China. I mean, I can imagine if China come into the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean.
Well, they're in the Panama Canal. The Chinese are big time.
That's true. And that is true. Well, William, let me ask you, with just a couple of minutes left here now, the implications for the dollar. The dollar, we've had this petrodollar, which was sort of put in place by Kissinger when Nixon was in, and when we went off the gold standard. Now, these countries, especially China and Russia, have been accumulating huge amounts of gold, and they've been, less and less using the dollar for international trade, using their own currencies, and I think in some cases gold. Do you see gold playing a role, perhaps, in their trading system of the OBAR countries?
Gold as a standard of trust.
Uh-huh.
And then the bilateral trade in renminbi and Russian ruble and the Tehran currencies and so forth instead of the dollar. And this is very, very advanced. I was told this in Beijing. This is how they see it. They see the dollar is used as a tool to loot countries, and their currency they view as a tool to trade.
Uh-huh.
So it's a big difference.
All right, and underneath that is gold. I mean, those countries. I mean, I guess
Russia and China are the biggest accumulators in central banks.
Gold. And I wonder, as I hear you saying, India seems to be moving towards the West. They are making gold more difficult for ownership there and trying to digitalize to take the currency away from people and taking their freedoms away, essentially, their economic freedoms. It's really strange, isn't it, William? And we're out of time now, unfortunately, but that the West, which was supposed to be the purveyor of freedom and liberty, is turning the opposite, it seems, and the Eastern countries, in some ways, looking like more of what our traditional values were, in some ways.
You could say that, I think, and it's very interesting how this is developing.
Well, I want to tell everybody to be sure to check into William's website. It's William, let me just make sure, it's William Engdahl, ENGDAHL.com. Lots of great articles there. I mean, will Trumpnomics bankrupt America? The Donald meets Sun Tzu and is founding Wanting.
Jay,
lots of.
Could I say one thing?
Yeah, please, quickly.
I hope you go to it. If they go to the website, they will get an offer, a pop-up window, for a free subscription newsletter every couple of weeks that I put out for content of my books and geopolitical pieces.
Excellent.
And all you have to do is sign up for that, and you're on board. And that that gives you something that is not in the online website.
Well, that's right. It's refreshingly different from what you're going to hear in the mainstream, and it's great news. It's great. I think great factual stuff there, William. Thank you so much for being with us again. Always a pleasure to have you.